Hello, everyone. I'm Zenobia Gottschalk, Head of Corporate Communications for Hedera Hashgraph. Thank you for joining us on our second quarantine town hall. It works out nicely for us since we are a distributed organization anyway, as is this community. So we are glad to be connected with you guys again. So joining me, you guys know and love them as usual, are Mance, Harmon, and Leemon, Baird. And we are also going to start off today with a special guest. So one of the things that we have heard from the community is that we'd love to hear more from your council members. We'd love to hear what they're doing. We'd love to hear how they're engaged. And, you know, we'd just like to see their smiling faces. So we pleased today to have Kamal Yousefi with us from Swisscom. Swisscom was one of the first council members to join us with our initial set of announcements. So hello, Kamal, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Zenobia. Many thanks for having me at Hedera Town Hall today.
Yes, so you know, we have a few questions from the community. I'm going to lob them over to you, and we'd love to hear from you. Tell us, you know, now a little over a year in, what has it been like being part of the Hedera Council?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, many thanks again for having me here in this session. And as I said, it's a great pleasure to be with you guys. Actually, it was, or I was actively following Hedera since April 2018 when I came in touch with some representatives from Hedera team. I was impressed by the very first version of the white paper, as I finally could find the missing part in the DLT ecosystem, which is providing a decentralized public network for the globe with a trusted enterprise-grade governance model. So it was something unique back at that point of time, and I really appreciate it. So I liked the vision, and therefore I engaged and I committed myself to support realizing the vision, starting with being Hedera Governing Council founding member, for sure on behalf of Swisscom. So for us as an organization, being part of the council give us a great opportunity to represent, first of all, our industry, which is the telco business. And last but not least, ensure that our expectations and requirements are considered and reflected at the service level on the top of Hedera. So it was an amazing journey for our organization to be part of the council. And for sure, at the personal level, I had the pleasure of interacting with pioneers and visionaries from the world's leading organizations, such as Leemon, Mance, and many others in the council. So it was a big pleasure.
Great. And as you look ahead, what about Hedera is most exciting to you?
So to be honest, there are two things that I really appreciated and I really like about Hedera Hashgraph. The first one is the decentralized governance model, covering there is no fork, so there is a guarantee for that. And equal voting for major decisions pertaining to the protocol code base and its further development. So we feel that we actively contribute in the development of the platform. We feel that we are involved. We see that our feedback and comments and also our experiences are reflected in the protocol. And therefore, we do our best to have or to come up with the best solution for a decentralized world. And and part of it as well is the diversity of the Hedera Council members, because remember, we are all part of different committees. We are all sharing our experiences. We are all learning from each other. So it helped us to come up with a solution which is suitable for different industries and different organizations. And on the second hand, or on the other side, I like also the technological breakthrough that Hedera managed to come with. So in a way, Hedera managed to empower the world with a trusted performant public network that addresses the challenges faced by other blockchain technologies. So you might hear about the blockchain dilemma, and if you look at the key dimensions that Hedera is providing to the community, you will quickly figure out that all these challenges are mastered, and and we managed to overcome the blockchain dilemma by providing low latency transactions with the guaranteed transaction finality, and we are talking about seconds, so not even minutes. Transaction ordering mechanism in the platform, and secure and reliable network, which is mainly governed by globally trusted enterprises. So if you put all these dimensions together, all these characteristics together, then you will come up with a fully decentralized, trusted platform.
Great. And Kamal, you mentioned a little bit about, some of the committees. Can you share which ones you are on and what is some of the work that they are doing?
Sure. I am personally involved in 2 committees, and I wish I could actively participate also in the others, but due to capacity considerations, I prefer to focus mainly on the tech committee. The tech committee provides governance of the technical and product roadmap of Hedera, and it also sets policies for node operations, such as the minimum hardware requirement to be used to deploy Hedera protocol, connectivity and hosting requirements. So what are the KPIs, what are the requirements to be able to be part of the network? And last but not least, steers the direction of software development. And as I mentioned, this also happens within the governance, and all the council members can equally vote on the directions that we agree on, or eventually also disagree on. So it's up to the discussions and the workshops we have.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, Kamal, thank you. We so appreciate you coming on and joining us today. You are, of course, welcome to stay on, but we thank you for your time and for being willing to answer some of those questions on behalf of the council and behalf of Swisscom.
It's my pleasure, and I am at your disposal whenever I can.
Thank you.
Okay. Guys, have a nice day. Enjoy your time, and let me know if you need anything from myself.
Thank you so much,
Thanks, Kamal.
Appreciate
Appreciate
it. Have a nice day. All right.
It has been great working with Kamal. I just really have appreciated him on the council. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, we have some fantastic council members.
Mm-hmm.
All right, for those who are just joining us now, hello. If you have not been to a Hedera town hall before, we have solicited questions from the community, some very, very serious and important, and others things that you're just curious about. And hey, we're in quarantine, so we all have time. So we're gonna start with some related to Hedera, and then we're gonna jump in at the end for some more personal thoughts from Mance and Leemon. And as I said, we solicited questions from the community. Leemon, one that we heard a lot from, we touched on it a little bit last time, but I think not to the extent that people would like to hear, is how is Hedera's proxy staking different from other networks? And also, when will it be available?
Oh yeah, so we are a proof of stake system. We are starting with a council running the nodes, and then eventually we'll move to other people, including anonymous nodes. So this is the path to decentralization as a whole webinar on that. The whole idea here is that we need to be secured every step along the way. So initially, when it's the council, it's pretty easy to make it secure. And it's proof of stake, and it's just, we're staking there. The important thing, though, is that by the time you get to anonymous nodes, if you want security against Sybil attacks, where one person pretends to be a bunch of people, you need to do proof of stake. Now, you could say, well, we want everyone who's holding coins to be running a node, but that won't happen. Some people don't want to run nodes. So the only way you could really have security there is if you then have proxy staking, so that most of the coins are being proxy staked to the nodes that are running. That means that those nodes get credit for those coins. So the way the consensus algorithm works is that the nodes are virtually voting on things on the order of the transactions and the timestamps and everything. And the nodes have a weight in the vote that is weighted by how many HBARs they have. And that could be the node itself staking the HBARs, or it can be other people around the world proxy staking to that node. So if you want to be secure in the final state where we have anonymous nodes, you have to have proxy staking. It has to have certain properties, which are different from, I think, the proxy staking we see in other ledgers. Initially, you don't need it at all. When we just have 39 council members running nodes, it doesn't matter, or 13 or whatever it is. It doesn't matter whether we have proxy staking or not. But the important thing will be in the long term, when we have anonymous nodes, that everybody can be able to proxy stake. So the goal of it from the beginning is for the security and the smooth running of the network itself. There are other reasons that people have set up something sort of like proxy staking on other ledgers for other reasons to try to motivate people to lock up coins or whatever. And it's none of that. We're not doing that. What we are doing is proxy staking as part of making the ledger work and making it be secure. So what are the implications of that? How does that affect what we do? Well, one thing is we don't need people to lock up their coins for very long periods. What we need you to do is to proxy stake your coins to a node that you think is reliable and is running well and has not shown indications of being bad in the past. When we get, I don't know when, a year from now, 2 years from now, whatever it is, and we can get to where we have anonymous nodes, the hope would be that we would have a lot of people doing anonymous nodes so that no one person would have too many of them. And that the people proxy staking would then be proxy staking to lots of different reliable anonymous nodes, so no one anonymous node would have all the proxy staking. We will have a cap on how much proxy staking can go to a single node. That way, it encourages people to spread it out. Now you could say, well, there could still be a Sybil attack. A bad guy stands up lots of nodes. But what we will have is you're encouraged to spread it out to reliable nodes that have been around for a long time, not just a node that stood up yesterday. And so you're encouraged then to be doing nodes that have been around for a while. And if a lot of people are doing nodes, then it becomes hard for one person to have stood up all of the anonymous nodes. This is the goal. If that is the goal, then we don't need to force you to lock up your coins for a long time. We can just basically let everybody proxy stake with their coins. We can make it a very easy thing to do. You can even make it where whoever manufactured your wallet could be encouraged to do the small amount of research that is needed to do useful proxy staking to make us secure. So we're talking about a very tiny amount of effort. The effort could be done on the behalf of the wallet maker. Oh, but what if the wallet maker is bad? Well, we want to get to a point where there's a lot of wallet makers, and we're already seeing that, an ecosystem of wallets starting to spring up. And I think eventually you'll even see embedded wallets inside of other programs that are kind of invisible. Those will be wallets too. So I think we'll see a large ecosystem of wallets, and then basically everybody will end up proxy staking. Another question would be, well, if you're doing that, which is different from proxy staking on other ledgers, then what kind of return would you get for proxy staking? Well, it could be minimal. It could be a very tiny amount. A tiny amount because you're only doing a tiny amount of work to decide who to proxy stake to. And you're not having to do something sacrificial like lock up your coins for long periods. So the proxy staking is a tiny amount of payment because you're only doing a tiny amount of work. And it's not even you, it's probably your wallet manufacturer or whoever wrote your wallet software. And so even then, it's even less that we need to do to motivate people to do this. We're just encouraging people to do the bare minimum amount of research on what the nodes are doing and how they've acted in the past, and then a very minimal amount of payment for that. And so it would be a very tiny percentage, it'd be almost nothing. Another question I've heard people say is, well, even with this kind of proxy staking, for a very different purpose from others, without the bonding or anything, why don't you give a really high percentage? You know, why don't you give a whole 1% or a whole 10% or a whole whatever? Wouldn't that be nice? Well, not really. I mean, even if it were 100%, it wouldn't matter. If everybody proxy stakes, then even if every day we paid out 100% of what you have and your coins doubled every day, it wouldn't help you in any way because everybody's coins would double every day. So the whole money supply would double every day. So sure, you have twice as many coins, but each coin is worth half as much, and so it balances out. It's the same value. So the whole point of the proxy staking payments was just to encourage a small amount of work. It'll be a very tiny amount. Staking payments are slightly different. That's paying the node to be a node. That has to be more because they do more work. They have bandwidth they have to pay for. They have processing that they have to do on a computer they had to pay for. And so staking will be a higher amount and presumably will be enough, I mean, in the long run has to be enough to motivate you to run a node. No more than that, it doesn't have to be $10,000 a day, but it has to be enough to motivate you to run a node. So someday when we have anonymous nodes, we will have staking, which will pay enough to encourage you to run a node. And we'll have proxy staking, which pays a microscopic amount because that's how much you're contributing and how much work you're having to do. And that's how it'll end up. None of that is needed until we have anonymous nodes. Right now, what we have is just very simple staking model. And that's good enough for the nodes we have that are just council members. But when we get to it, when we get to having actual anonymous nodes, then this will be very important. So that's what we're doing. And I hope that was clear.
All right, thanks, Leemon. Mance, next one is for you. You've been talking a little bit in some of the media about HCS being used with R3 Corda, Hyperledger, Quorum, etc. Can you talk about the integration or the use with some of these platforms and what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so, last time we were here in the last town hall, I had mentioned that we were exploring a handful of categories of use cases. I think to answer this question, it's useful to sort of roll up those into two main categories or top level categories of use cases that we really find interesting that we're exploring. So conceptually, let's think about two high level categories of use cases, audit and sync. Sync here refers to the need to order transactions in distributed applications. And we're addressing that top level category of sync by integrating with the obvious platforms, Hyperledger, Corda, Quorum, others. And of course, people can build their own dapps or distributed applications in an appnet using HCS without using those other platforms. They can just do it directly. But we're addressing those that top level category primarily by integrating with these platforms that I just described. Audit refers to any use case that might benefit from some form of proof of action. There are a great many use cases that already operate with some level of market trust today. They're in the market today, meaning that the market is already affording those use cases, those companies, some degree of trust, but they can benefit from an added degree of trustworthiness that they can get from HCS. AdsDax is a fantastic example of this, right? In their use case, they simply integrated directly with HCS to provide an additional level of trust in the click-through rates for their customers. However, our vision here is to integrate with other categories of enterprise platforms like enterprise resource planning, customer relationship management, enterprise asset management, product lifecycle management. In the enterprise world, there are a full range of these types of platforms that provide an opportunity to take advantage of HCS and end up with what we internally sort of refer to as a trust plus model. There are audit and proof of action use cases throughout the enterprise that would benefit from this. And so we see a future where if those transactions weren't recorded through HCS, then they didn't happen, right? That's what HCS provides, proof that they happened. So that's how we view the market.
All right, thanks, Mance. All right, and while we are on the topic of trust and proof, Leemon, another question from the community here. All transactions and balances are for the public to see. Are you concerned about the privacy of HBAR users?
So privacy, of course, on a public network, the network itself is public. Anything you do, any information you store in the network, any messages or transactions you send through the network are public. The whole world knows about it. And that's what a public network is. Sometimes that's good enough. And you're perfectly happy with that. In which case, great. It's wonderful. Public ledger is what you need. Sometimes you want privacy. Okay, so what kind of privacy do you want? Maybe what you want is to store information that's private. Then what you could do is when you store a file in Hedera, you encrypt it before you store it. That works great. But then there's limits to that. You can't prove to somebody else what's in that file without giving them the key to read it. Okay, so then you could do a layer of zero knowledge proof type stuff, where what you store is encrypted in a very weird way that allows you to tell other people things in it and they can see it. And you can do that on top of Hedera. It's a layer on top of Hedera. You can do that. Or maybe what you want to do is do calculations with the data that you want to keep secret. Here things get more interesting. There is actually a form of math that does that, fully homomorphic computation, but that's nowhere close to where you could do that on ledgers. So if you wanted to have true privacy in the data that's actually being calculated on by the ledger itself, a public ledger won't do what you want. You'd have to have something else. Currently, people say, well, use a private ledger. Yeah, but then you don't have the trust that you'd have from a public ledger. So the whole question is, how can I get the trust of a public ledger with the privacy of a private ledger? There is a way to do it. That's HCS. That's the Hedera Consensus Service. The Hedera Consensus Service sends transactions from your private application network that's all private and encrypted and only people you like can join it and everything is secret. You can send the transactions to Hedera. You can encrypt the transactions themselves, so they're flowing through Hedera, but it's encrypted. Nobody knows what it means. Hedera doesn't know what it means. Hedera just puts them in order and puts timestamps on them. And Hedera gives you trust in that order and in those timestamps. And then they go back to all the people in the AppNet. And then the people in the AppNet have the key to decode it, to decrypt it, to interpret it, to do business logic on it or game logic or whatever it is, to do the calculations with it. It would be like a smart contract that has actual secrets inside of itself, which you can never do on a public network for general secrets. You would have to use an AppNet. And so this AppNet is a way of getting privacy. Now, if you don't care about privacy, then just use a purely public ledger. Hedera is great. If you do care about privacy, use Hedera's Consensus Service, HCS, and then you can have the privacy that you want. And so I think that it is important for people to think about privacy in everything they're doing. Oh, there is one other thing. If you're doing some kind of a proof of event or proof of action, you're trying to show that you did something and have it in an immutable record, then what you can record in Hedera doesn't have to be an encrypted version of it. It can be a hash of it. And so that also is helpful, not just because it keeps it secret, but also because you could have gigantic pieces of information that shrink down to a little tiny hash. And you're only paying to store a little tiny hash on Hedera or to feed a little tiny hash through Hedera. And we have lots of people that are doing this right now. This is a very big use case for HCS. And again, you have great privacy if you want to just store send the hash through it. But if you want to publicly say something to the world and know that everybody else knows what you said and they all are seeing the same thing, then being public is a good thing. And so you have transparency. And so you always have this choice. You can do transparency or you can do privacy. Both are important, and you can do both if you want to.
All right, thanks, Leemon. Okay, Mance, next one is for you. Will there be another community earn program similar to the daily timestamp? I think that would be good.
Well, so the testing program that we provided earlier this year, actually last year, excuse me, provided invaluable feedback prior to open access. We did identify and fix a number of issues that we found through that program. But today we know that the network performs well and the core cryptocurrency service and the HCS are also performing well. So we don't really need a community test program in the same way that we needed it then. Our efforts have been focused on the lower layers, the infrastructure layer, and building out the functionality that we've promised, and that is lower down in the stack than providing an end user interface to test the network like we did before. So while we don't have plans for additional community testing today, I wouldn't be surprised at all if some of the projects that we're involved with do result in some type of community testing opportunity. So again, nothing is planned today with those projects. It just appears to me that as these all mature, there may be opportunities for a testing program where the same kinds of tests that we were doing before would be appropriate and helpful as we continue down this path.
Great, thanks, Mance. Leemon, the next one, I typically don't, subscribe to sort of back and forth, but I think this question has popped up. So there was a critique by Amin Gunserer, who, is also running his own cryptocurrency startup, about Hedera. And it says that the correctness of the entire Hashgraph protocol seems to hinge on every participant knowing and agreeing upon N, the total number of participants in the system. This is a difficult number to determine in an open distributed system. And then in the same article, I think maybe there was some confusion, but you noted all of the nodes at any given time know how many nodes there are. So maybe if you can help us clear up some of the confusion on behalf of Mr. Gunserer and the reporter and the rest of us.
Yeah, so we're a proof of stake. Maybe this isn't clear. From the very beginning, the very first Hashgraph paper that was published said, you have this virtual voting going on, and you could give every node an equal vote, or you could weight it by their stake. And so from the beginning, we've said you could do proof of stake. And Hedera running right now is proof of stake. Each node is weighted by a number. And at the moment, we have the 13 nodes with equal numbers, but in the long term, those numbers will fluctuate and they won't even be equal. So right now, it is a proof of stake system. Hedera is a proof of stake system. You don't have to know how many nodes there are. You have to know how much stake each of the nodes has. That's all. You have to know how much stake each of the participants has. The participant can be anonymous, but if you have a cryptocurrency, you could say, well, your stake is how much cryptocurrency you have, in which case all you have to know about the node is its IP address and its account, the account that holds the HBARs. That would be all that you would need to know. So for Hashgraph in general and for Hedera's implementation of Hashgraph, what you need to know for a proof of stake system is how many HBARs are in each HBAR account. Now, I hear people say maybe that's vaguely hard to do, but not that. I mean, they say counting computers would be hard to do, but you don't have to count computers. You have to know how much stake is in each account, how many cryptocurrencies, how much cryptocurrency is in each account, which is what every ledger does. There's no, it's not hard. Does Hedera know at every moment how many HBARs are in each account? Well, of course. The accounts are anonymous. We don't know who has each account. If you create an account completely anonymously, we have no idea who you are, but we do know how many HBARs are in that account. We have to. I mean, that's the whole point of a ledger. That's true of every ledger. That was true of Bitcoin, the very first ledger. You have to know how many Bitcoins are in each unspent transaction. That's almost the definition of a ledger, is we have to have agreement on these things. So every ledger is able to keep track of how many coins are in each account. And so, yes, proof of stake system needs to know that. But sure, a ledger knows that. That's the whole point.
Thank you, Leemon. Okay, Mance, we're going to shift over to council for a little bit. So we had a number of questions come in about council. I'm going to kind of lump them all together here. Can you talk a little bit about the main challenges of council recruitment? Is it identifying use cases, legal concerns, etc.? And then related to that, for those of us working at large companies, how can we pitch Hedera Council membership to our own organizations, especially for developing markets where local community members' knowledge may prove very insightful?
Sure, okay. Well, first off, convincing world-class organizations to join the council requires that we are selling a big vision, right? Full stop. We go in with a big vision and we have to convince that organization to buy into that vision. That's the biggest challenge, not because it's difficult, but because it takes time. It takes time to help the decision makers in large enterprises really understand why we exist and what our mission is. Often we will pick up many internal champions within those organizations along the way who help us identify the key internal stakeholders and help make the appropriate introductions within the organization. In many cases, we've found it fantastic to have internal champions that are pitching the council opportunity right beside us in concert with our team as we navigate that process internally. So I do want to explicitly call out that there are a number of council members today that are the direct result of community involvement. You out there have made those appropriate introductions and been those champions, and you've been instrumental in helping us close a number of our current council members. So it's already the case that the community is directly contributing to the growth of the council. And so for that, we thank you. And yes, of course, we continue to welcome your contribution. Are there legal issues that slow things down? Typically not anymore. I mean, early on, it was the case that we, that we were building a set of bylaws for the LLC. And until we got our first 5 council members, those bylaws were being modified and changed. And so, yes, there was some friction, if you will, in the legal process, but that by and large has ended. Given the number of council members that we have today, we present the terms of the LLC, the bylaws, and the organizations are, there is no opportunity to go in and change things at this point. So that is behind us. At this stage, it's all about selling the vision and getting the buy-in throughout the different parts of the organization, and that's it, and bringing them on. If you want to propose council members and can help in the ways that we've just described, reach out to us. Jordan Freed is in charge of that activity. Send him an email. It's just jordan@hedera.com.
All right. Thank you, Mance. Okay, the next one, Leemon, we're going to lob this one over to you. If demand accelerated quickly for TPS, how easy is it to increase the throttle above 10,000 TPS?
Oh yeah, sure. So we just change a number on the server right now, and that would make it almost twice as fast. So what we have right now is we're seeing about 13 transactions per second. It's been rising over time, and I imagine we will see big step increases in that, but we're nowhere near 10,000. If we were to start seeing, even 1,000 sustained, then we would probably reduce the throttle somewhat. I mean, raise it to a higher number, so more than 10,000. We've tried out the current software and we've seen it run almost twice as fast as the 10,000 it's currently throttled to. And there's a bunch of things we can do to make it faster. So and we haven't even tuned the software. We can tune it to make it faster. We also could start using the GPU. So we've actually written software to do signature verification on the GPU, using a graphics card to check whether your signatures on your transactions are correct or not, which is a huge amount of time, checking those signatures, verifying those signatures. We have that and it runs fast on the GPU. We're very happy with that. And it is not running our software right now. Why? Because we're running at 13 per second. We're seeing 13 a second of traffic. And we can do 10,000 already is what we're throttling to. So there's no particular need to pay to have the GPU on all our nodes. And what we have said is that we're going to have the cheaper nodes that don't have a graphics card in them. And then as soon as it becomes clear that we are approaching the 10,000 or maybe even at 1,000, I don't know, at some point when we're doing a lot more than 13, then we will pay the money to upgrade all of our nodes to have GPUs. And similarly, we'll prioritize tuning and all sorts of things. There's a lot of things we can do to make it faster. But right now, we already are seeing slowly growing increase in TPS. I think as big enterprises have POCs that then actually get deployed, you'll see big steps in that. And as it gets faster, we'll make it faster. But today, if it suddenly was going at 999,000, if it was suddenly going at 9,999, we would just change the throttle to be a higher number. But if we wanted to make it a lot higher, then we would have to do some of these other things, which we would do at that point.
Right. We have some great options there. Mance, this next one is for you. We did not answer it last time and it continues to be asked. So I think this is now the time where we really have to address it. Beyond guidance by financial regulators, was there any US or other government that had involvement in the development of Hashgraph or Hedera? And specifically, the questioner asks, the focus of this question is on origination or other governmental involvement that could cause undue influence.
Right. Well, so first off, I can understand why we continue to get these types of questions, right? Leemon and I both spent a lot of years in the US Air Force working on projects that were totally unrelated to distributed consensus. I left the military in 2004. Leemon retired in 2009, long before Leemon began working on Hashgraph, which kicked off roughly 2012, 2013 timeframe. So if the concern is that the government provided support or resources and therefore has leverage or influence over me and Leemon or the project, then the answer is emphatically no, they don't. Not the US government, not any government. There's just nothing there whatsoever. Now, however, in the interest of full transparency, we were actually approached by SHIELD, and we did agree to provide consulting services during times of crisis. But outside of that, there's nothing out there, no influence or involvement in the government at all.
And I still haven't gotten to be on the flying aircraft carrier thing. I really want to get on that thing. Oh, well.
We should put a node in orbit using one of those aircraft carriers.
I do want to jump in one thing. Mance and I do not run the governing council. There is a reason for that. Even if Mance and I are evil and are secretly space aliens, we don't run the council. The council is run by the council members, and the council members are large organizations spread around the world under different governments on different continents. This is the whole point of good governance. So I just want to throw that out, that there's a reason that we don't trust ourselves. You shouldn't trust us. That's the whole point.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. And it is, it's very true. I mean, all of the important decisions have already been given over to the council and to the board of managers. I report to the board of managers. They can fire me today if they choose to do so. And so we have no more influence than you would expect of anybody in that type of scenario.
All right, thank you both. And I look forward to the community's feedback on what your SHIELD names should be.
I haven't given it much thought.
All right. Leemon, next one is for you. How many mirror nodes are currently live and who is running them?
I love this. People are running mirror nodes. It isn't just us, there's a community. So we have a mirror node that we're running, and Dragonglass is running a mirror node that lets you do all sorts of cool things. Kabuto is running a mirror node that lets you go in and do cool things. Armanino has a mirror node. I understand AdsDax has a mirror node, or is about to. And Acor has a meta mirror node. It's a mirror node of mirror nodes that checks up on all the different mirror nodes and tells you what's going on with them. I think they're about to roll that out, but I love it. So we have a community that is not only building mirror nodes, they're building meta mirror nodes that are mirror nodes of mirror nodes. This is what I like to see. I'd like to see a community growing around an ecosystem growing around it. So I'm looking forward to seeing more. And it's open source software. You can download it and run a mirror node. I would encourage people to get the software and look at it.
Very cool. Okay, Mance, is Hedera in any talks with dapps to migrate from Ethereum to Hedera?
Well, strategically, we are pursuing projects that will generate very large transactions per second, large TPS in the short term. Those projects simply do not exist on Ethereum today because Ethereum as a platform can't handle the kind of TPS that we are interested in, and the cost per transaction is simply too expensive, even if they could. Having said that, we are watching the evolution of the DeFi community. That's really interesting. But again, we're giving priority to those use cases that will result in high TPS. We are doing what we can to make it easy for developers on Ethereum to migrate or use Hedera. But if we look at the use cases and the projects on Ethereum today, they simply aren't the kinds of projects that have the kind of volume that we're really interested in.
All right, that seems fair. Leemon, while we are on the topic of TPS, can you talk about who's currently processing the most transactions through HCS and how many transactions a day they're processing, and maybe give a little bit of color on the applications themselves too?
Yeah, this is fun. So we had a lot of pent-up demand for HCS. Mance even talked about how people were using cryptocurrency memo fields as sort of a fake HCS before we had it. And so those people have now moved to actually using HCS. So you have AdsDax using it to prevent fraud in the advertising industry, which is very cool. And they're increasing their throughput continuously. You have Acor that is tracking information related to the coronavirus, which is important. And so Acor is doing that. Same guys doing the MetaMirror node. They're doing cool things. You have Power Transition that is using it to manage microgrids for electricity, which is an important thing, especially as we go to alternate energy sources like solar panels and so on. The grid becomes far more complicated because you have lots of people buying and selling. You have backup plans, backup sources of energy, and you have storage of energy, and it becomes very confusing. And they're working with microgrids, and it gets much, this is a big deal. I mean, as the future goes forward, power grids become more and more complicated. Every year, they're becoming more complicated. You have someone like Agrio. Agrio is providing liquidity to small farmers that can't afford to get the capital they need, or aren't able to get capital that they need in traditional ways. And so Agrio is working to help them. And these are some of the people that are using this. These are some of our bigger users. You asked who's the biggest of them. I would say AdsDax has the most transactions per second of them. But I think we're seeing growth, and we'll see more growth over time.
All right, and while we are on the topic of dapps and use cases, Mance, we have a question on, I know last time we talked about Coupon Bureau. Is there an ETA for when the Coupon Bureau plans to launch their use case on the mainnet?
Yeah, so the Coupon Bureau has announced that in the press releases, I think, that it should be this fall, late summer, early fall. What I find very interesting personally is that when they begin to roll this out, it's not the case that they're rolling out to 1 or 2 or 3 retail outlets. They're rolling out entire retail chains at a time. So when they roll out, it will be a chain. As I understand it, it will be a full chain that rolls out later this year. And then once they start rolling out, within 18 months, very aggressive schedule, but this is their plan. Within 18 months, there will be a Coupon Bureau connected store within 5 miles of every consumer in the United States. So that's the size of their vision, the scale of their vision, and we're hoping and expecting that it ramps up very quickly and should start later this year.
Very cool. Okay, Mance, we've got one more serious one for you before we get to some out of this world questions for you both. We are only in May, but can Hedera enthusiasts expect the last half of 2020 to be as exciting as the first half of the year? And I'm pretty sure they don't mean global pandemic-wise. So can you talk about, if so, why should we be looking forward to the second half of 2020?
Yeah. Well, first, I'm glad to hear that you think 2020 has been exciting. I agree. It has been a very exciting year for us as well. But let me say, I loved this question. I do love this question because what you're really asking is whether we've gotten lucky so far. And should people assume that Hedera will continue to have the same level of success that we've seen this year? And on this question, I have several thoughts. First, our initial council members were announced in February of last year. Since then, we've more than tripled the size of the council. And the point there is that we've demonstrated our ability to recruit world-class council members over many quarters. And we've been able to do that while concurrently supporting third-party integrations and working with a range of projects on POCs and deployments. And that continues to be the case. Secondly, we don't depend on heroics from our team members for our success. While we, like every successful startup, have benefited from occasionally having team members accomplishing extraordinary things, our day-to-day execution depends on combining talent and competency with good process. And in that regard, we aren't changing anything. We have been blessed to attract world-class talent to the project. We have a fantastic team, and they have a singular focus of driving growth and adoption, which also means continued decentralization and usage. Also, we continue to benefit from our differentiated tech and the broader community of developers. So this is a marathon, and we will continue executing the same activities that we have been pursuing. None of that changes. And that's not restricted to council recruitment, but extends to product management, engineering, marketing, legal, council operations, all aspects of the organization. And I am looking forward to a fantastic 2020.
Great. Thank you, Mance. Okay, Leemon, shifting gears, it appears that some in the community are not satisfied with us just being a globally distributed organization. We have a question that would like to know, how would you establish an intergalactic Hedera network?
Great. Well, if we have faster than light communication, that becomes easy. If we don't, we can still do it. You can put a node in Andromeda, but you know, the lag is going to really kill you there. It would not slow down consensus. It would just be the long ping time would mean that it would take a long time for Andromeda to know what consensus we came up with. In the slightly shorter term, a moon base or a Mars base absolutely could have nodes on our network. The Mars base is inconvenient. You probably wouldn't want to have a lot of nodes there. It would slow us down too much. A moon base though, with a 3-second round trip, you could actually do that. And you could have a number of nodes on the moon, maybe one on each moon base, and also have a number here, and it wouldn't really hurt you too much. I think you could end up with reasonable consensus algorithms or times. Also, somebody suggested we put a node in orbit. I think that'd be cool. There is radiation concerns, even low Earth orbit, within the protection of the Van Allen belt. I think you still have some concerns. And it's also somewhat expensive to put it there. And if it's going to do a lot of computations, you have cooling problems and power problems, but you could do it. And I think that might be something we'll do at some point. I love the new cheap access to space that we're getting. That would let you build big things, big power plants and big cooling systems and big computers. So maybe we'll see one in orbit fairly soon. That's one of those things that I'd like to see in the fairly near future, sort of like a few years. Quantum, post-quantum. Did you hear what happened last month? NIST actually finished round 2's last conference for their competition for the post-quantum, and they'll be announcing the round 3 candidates sometime this summer. And so that suggests that we will have a winner by next summer or maybe the year after, early the year after. So when we do that, we'll probably add an option of post-quantum signatures to our system as well. And that will make it post-quantum too. So yeah, that'll be coming too. But no rush on that. Not any immediate danger there. And so intergalactic, we'll work on that. Tell me when you establish a base on Andromeda, and I will absolutely help you set up an intergalactic network for us.
All right, you guys will see those updates to the product roadmap shortly, I'm sure. Okay, Leemon and Mance, how did you come up with the name Hedera, and what does it mean?
Oh yeah, it's the Latin word for ivy. So English ivy, one of the most common ivies, is called Hedera helix. That's just what it's called. In fact, there was a company named Helix because of that very reason, because it was based on us, and we're Hedera, so they're Helix. So it's a Latin word for ivy. I like it because it's alive, it's green, it's something you like, it's something that spreads out, becomes kind of decentralized, which is kind of cool. It has a nice image. It's also, have you ever noticed sometimes you'll have a wall of writing, but instead of being broken into paragraphs where you drop to the next line and indent, you instead have a little symbol that separates the sections. So the paragraph has been, you have a little symbol. It looks like a heart-shaped leaf with a little bit of a line above it, like a piece of a vine. It's actually representing a Hedera leaf, and that symbol for the last 200 years has been called a Hedera. So sometimes when you're reading a document and you see a little symbol separating it out instead of using normal paragraphs, those are Hederas. I thought that was kind of cool too. So that's why we ultimately ended up with Hedera. We did want a word that started with H, just like Hashgraph, and it goes well with our HBAR logo. We wanted a word that would be easy to spell. I think Hedera is pretty easy to spell, H-E-D-E-R-A. And we wanted a word that would be easy to pronounce when you see it written. So either way, if you hear it, you can write it. If you see it written, you can pronounce it. We wanted it to be a word that didn't have too many syllables, that was easy to say. And so we thought for a whole long time before someone came up with Hedera, and I loved it. I thought she had a great idea. Hedera is a wonderful name. So now we're Hedera.
Fantastic. Okay, we're gonna try to speed round these next few so we can wrap up by the top of the hour. Leemon, in your opinion, what are the top 3 scientific achievements or discoveries of all time? And the questioner wanted to note, excluding Hashgraph, of course.
No, I wouldn't say Hashgraph is the greatest of all time, but I would say in physics, I would have to say Newtonian mechanics. Newton didn't just invent Newtonian mechanics. He, in some sense, invented modern science and the way we do science. And so F equals ma is cool, inverse square gravity is cool, but it was more than that. It was saying we can explain the universe by solving differential equations and having simple rules like inverse square. We can explain everything from a rock dropping on Earth to the planets going around the sun and the moons going around the planets, all with one simple equation. That fundamental idea, I think, changed science, or is a reflection of a change that was happening. That's always a debate. But I would say Newtonian mechanics was probably the biggest invention in physics, more so than relativity or quantum mechanics, because those were cool, but they didn't change the nature of science. In biology, I'd have to say DNA, understanding DNA. There's a lot we don't understand, but I think it's just going to, in the future, just change everything. We haven't got there yet, but I think it's just going to change everything. Understanding how DNA worked was huge. Starts with Mendel with what are genetics, and then goes now into how can we sequence fast, but the understanding of DNA was huge. And then let me say math. You could argue whether it's a science or not. In math, I would say that the one single thing that was the biggest achievement sounds like several unrelated ones. The proof of the halting problem, the proof of the incompleteness theorem, Gödel's incompleteness theorem, and the Hilbert's Entscheidungs problem. They sound like 3 different things, but it really is all one thing. It's what is the limitations of math itself? What is math in a very fundamental sense? And so just like Newton didn't just invent physics, he invented science. This wasn't just an addition to math, it gave us a deep insight into what math is. So I'd say those 3.
All right, something for everyone to noodle on for the rest of the afternoon. Mance, one for you. On the last call, I think you shared a little bit about some of your hobbies, and one is that you love cooking. We have a request from the community that you share your family's favorite dessert recipe or something else sweet.
Something sweet, sure. Well, so, you know, I have loved a particular dessert for a couple of decades, and always point to this one. It's really simple. You take strawberries, you add some sugar, balsamic vinegar, and then you add to that a dollop of mascarpone cheese, lady fingers, and cracked black pepper. And that combination is what I would describe as palate shocking. It's just a fantastic combination of flavors that you don't normally experience. And so this is my go-to whenever we're really looking for something special for dessert.
Nice. All right, community, I expect some pictures of that on some channels as you all attempt either that or, you know, Newtonian physics. Okay, and Leemon, we are going to wrap up with one. We've given you 4 minutes to answer the question that has been asked of some other tech luminaries recently. How would you colonize Mars?
Oh, that's easy. It's clearly there's one thing you have to do. What you need are self-replicating robots. You need to have mining robots. Already, we're automating the mining industry. And then you have to have refining robots. You know, it's just a big vat and some power. You have to have manufacturing robots. Well, we have 3D printers and we have other kinds of 3D milling and so on. And you need to have the robots that are general purpose that can put them together and do transportation and stuff. And that gives you a closed system of robots. Once you have that, and all those pieces are being built very rapidly, even as we talk. Once you have that, you send a small seed to Mars, and after a while, you have hundreds of square miles covered with underground cities. Yes, they should all be underground. You're gonna have to mine your resources. You build it in the mines that you dug or in volcanic tunnels because you want radiation protection. But you'd have enormous cities underground. You can put farms underground. You put everything there. There's tons of water on Mars. Once you have that, humans move in and it's easy. You're moving into a Garden of Eden that's been prepared for you. I think that that's the right answer. If you don't have the self-replicating robots, you'll never have a self-supporting colony on Mars. And if you just go live in a tin can and have to rely on supplies from Earth, that's somewhat scary. I think the right way is to do this. And I said Mars, the same thing applies to the moon. Everything is good on the moon too. It's closer even, except you have a little bit short on water. But initially we use the water at the poles. So the same thing is true on the moon. Put up enough robots to be self-replicating, controlled from Earth, but mostly self-controlled. And then when you have a beautiful base built, humans can move in and it'll be a great retirement spot. Maybe I'll get to retire to one of those 2 places. I would love to.
And we'll have to make sure that the robots also take up a copy of the, you know, can set up their Hedera nodes.
Exactly.
All right, well, we are at the top of the hour. I want to thank everyone who submitted their questions beforehand. We really appreciate you all. We hope that everybody is staying safe and well, and we look forward to your feedback. You know, it seems like this is something that is valuable, so we will continue to do it as long as the community finds value. So thank you all, be safe, and have a great morning, evening, afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.